We are back, and we have the great Winston Marshall. Winston, how are you doing?
Hi, Tate. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course, of course. Well, for I'm sure people in the audience are well aware of who you are, but maybe for those who aren't, could you give a quick intro of who you are, what you do?
Sure. My name's Winston. I'm host of the Winston Marshall Show, which is a British political commentary show. Not only do we interview all of the wrong thinkers this side of the pond, I should say, but we cover quite a lot of American stuff as well. And I've been doing this now we're about to celebrate our 2-year birthday as a show. Before that, I had a career in the music industry. I was a founding member of the band Mumford and Sons, which I
Mm,
did for 14 years, and I still play music. I this year went and played with Oliver Anthony down in North Carolina. I
based.
went and played with on the Kill Tony show when he came to London. He did the O2 earlier this year. So I still do music, but most of my time now is on the show trying to work out what's going on in my country. I should say this. In America, there's a very healthy alternative media landscape where, well, actually, it used to be healthy. Now it's gone off the fucking deep end with some of the nut jobs and the conspiracy theories they're coming up with. Having
Yeah.
said that, it is the case, nevertheless, that you have a podcast sort of ecosystem where, as well as the nut jobs, you have a lot of people who are genuinely pursuing the truth. In Britain, what happened was you have the mainstream media, very similar to yours, and then all of the podcasts that dominate the charts, dominate advertising space, and dominate the ear and airwaves of the people are actually mainstream media adjacent. They have exactly the same worldview. News agents, rest is politics. So basically, the ecosystem of alternative opinion, that is not of the corporate media, is much smaller still, and even within podcasting is much smaller. And the
Hmm.
situation in our country is much worse than it is in America. It's a bit like what America would have like had Kamala won.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that's a little bit about what we're trying to do and what's going on and the issues that people care most about and we're most worried about. Well, there's free speech is certainly a big part of it, which I could talk to you at some length about. But this story that I think you brought me on to speak about really speaks for the real moral decay of
Mm,
my country. And this is another example of asylum seekers coming in and brutally raping young minors. In this
mm,
case, in a town called Leamington Spa, which is not too far from Stratford upon Avon, where William Shakespeare was from working. And basically, beautiful, idyllic England,
mm,
the Shire, if you will. And this young girl, aged 15, was raped by two 17-year-old Afghans who had come here illegally
mm.
via small boats across the channel. One at the end of last year, one at the beginning of this year. Both of them were 17. And they stole this poor girl's virginity.
Mm.
She was in the middle of her GCSE exams, which is the most important exams, which obviously it's completely put her out of whack. And she's even reported as such. They haven't reported her name, but she has made statements to short statements to the media and her mother as well about how distressing this whole thing is. And a horrible video of it
Mm.
went online.
Yeah.
And, this is not the first time, and I can talk to you about this sort of history of this happening. But I mean, a couple of things just to show how outrageous this really fucking is. And sorry to curse, but
No, you're
it's
good. We're on
really
Rumble. You're good.
heinous.
Yeah.
Uh, in court, the lawyer defending one of the Afghans, and the lawyer is called Joshua Radcliffe, and defending one of them is called Isra Nayazal. This is what he said in court. There are cultural differences. He is not used to a society where women are free and deemed equal to men. He is not used to a society where alcohol is freely available. He is morally at sea.
Mm,
There are massive cultural barriers that have become massive moral barriers. But
mm,
he may make a life for himself in this country eventually. Now, he's been sentenced to 9 years and 10 months. The other perpetrator, or I should say rapist, has been sentenced to 10 years and 8 months. To make things all the more ridiculous, the next day, the other side of the country in Bolton, which is just north of Manchester,
mm,
Manchester in the news 2 months ago because a certain Jihad al-Shami, Syrian-born, murdered Jews at a synagogue in an Islamist attack. The same city you'll remember from 2017 where at an Ariana Grande concert, 24 young girls and kids were brutally murdered in an Islamist attack by a second-generation Libyan migrant. I'll come back to that because that could have been prevented and wasn't prevented because someone saw the attacker and thought because he had brown skin, he didn't want to be accused of racism, so he didn't step in and do something. That shows you the political correctness literally kills. But I'll come back to that again with regards to the rape of Britain. So the next day after this story is reported in the Times, in Bolton, near to Manchester, another Afghan, this time a 28-year-old, also an asylum seeker, illegal migrant. This one's called Sultani Bakatash, born in 97, raped 2 teenage girls this weekend, or he's been charged with it at least anyway. And this comes, look, why it's important to Americans. I remind you last week that an Afghan immigrant, a legal immigrant, killed a National Guard in DC, Sarah Beckstrom. Another one remains in critical condition. And at the same time, down in Fort Worth, another Afghan was stopped in an attempted Islamist attack, which he bizarrely announced on TikTok, and that was thwarted and foiled, fortunately. It is the case that Afghans do not have the same culture as us in the West.
Yep.
Whether they came here legally or illegally, it is clear, as even the lawyer defending them in court will say, they do not have the same culture as us. Yep. It gets worse. Afghans are 22 times more likely to be convicted of sexual offences than British citizens. That's according to the Centre for Migration. I actually did a whole episode with this about the guy reporting on this. If you want to see on my show, it's a guy called Robert Bates, Centre for Migration Control. In Germany, this was a couple of years ago now, back in 2021, there was a young politician, only 27-year-old, called Marie-Therese Kaiser, who was fined. She was part of the AfD party. She was fined for citing government statistics about Afghans in Europe. She cited the government statistics, and she was fined 6,000 euros for this. That, because it was inciting hatred. That, despite being 0.4% of Germany's population, Afghans overrepresented in sexual offences. In 2021, they accounted for a significant share of the 677 reported gang rapes. Some analyses claiming Afghans were 70 times more likely to be suspects than native Germans. Not all cultures are equal. Yep. And this is the great fallacy that progressives have been telling us for decades. This doesn't come out of nowhere in our country. This isn't in a vacuum. This is after decades of migrants, be they legal or illegal, targeting young British girls because they were white, because they were kafir, because they were not Muslim. Now, predominantly this has been perpetrated by those of Pakistani men from a very specific part of Pakistan. So not even all of Pakistan. And this began, so in Britain, we didn't really have much immigration from South Asia until after the war, really until the end of the 40s, beginning of the 50s. And almost immediately then you have reports, not just in the police, but in the papers, of South Asian men grooming young girls. Now, over the decades, this has amounted to tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of young girls, some of them not just brutally gang raped, but some of them horrifically murdered. One guy, one of the perpetrators, gloated in court about chopping up the girl and putting it in the kebab meat of his shop. This is the most heinous crimes against humanity imaginable. And it's all the more offensive because none of it had to happen. Look, every population has their heinous criminals. Every
Sure.
population has the heinous mass murderers and pedophiles. There's, it's all evil, and we must call it out. But in this case, these people, we've invited them in. Now, when I go to your country, when I go to any country, even when I go to, well, maybe especially when I go to a Muslim majority country, I'm on best behavior. I
Yeah.
respect this
Yeah.
country. And look, if I went to Afghanistan, it doesn't mean I'm going to start doing as they do and raping and treating women badly as they do. Within
Right.
reason, I will respect the laws of the local country, the local culture. I'll respect it. These people are not. They're coming to our country. Most of them are coming illegally, but not all of them, as was the case in DC. He came
Yeah.
legally. So we've got to talk about legal migration as
Yeah.
well as illegal migration. But, and this is another kick in the balls for us. It's really, I mean, a mountain of offenses, but they're fleeing not Afghanistan. They're not flying here from Afghanistan. They're coming here from France.
Right.
There's no war in France. They are not fleeing anything. They're coming here because, truth be told, they're not asylum seekers. They're economic migrants. That's what
Yep.
they are. They want a better life because here there's bloody good welfare. There's a bloody good system where they know they can come here. They get pretty good cash. Now, I can talk to you about the system, about how they're coming over and the sort of new techno-feudalist state that's arriving. But at the very core of all of these issues is the fact that not all cultures are equal, and we have been importing en masse on an unprecedented scale in history young men from cultures that are not compatible with ours, and they are literally murdering and raping our daughters.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm really glad you made that point that not all cultures are equal because in this post-war consensus that we've had all across the West, this has been the point that they've been trying to sell us on. And we get data point after data point coming in, anecdote after anecdote, story after story, screaming this is not true, this is false, this is objectively false. President Trump was making this point yesterday in his rally in Pennsylvania. We covered it in the opening of the show. Is he emphasized over and over again, like, hey, you know what, it'd kill us to take some migrants from like maybe Norway or Denmark, these countries that have a culture and overall a sense of morality that would sort of seamlessly assimilate into the United States. But instead, we keep insisting on bringing people from countries like Somalia, from Afghanistan, from Haiti, countries that their population have demonstrated over and over again are incompatible with the way we conduct our affairs in America. It's absolutely ridiculous. And so, to your point, if you're you know, in the British public and you're looking at this, because I mean you made the point they're illegal and legal migration is the issue here. How else can you view the government's relationship with you other than hatred? Because they continue to import these people, and the British people over and over again have voted to reduce migration at every step, and that's according to polling seems to be the primary issue in Britain and in America. And not do they just ignore it, but they keep cranking the faucet up. They keep, you know, they keep pouring on more and more gasoline onto the fire. I know I saw your interview. That's where I met you when you came over and you came on our show and you interviewed Tim, and he made the point that, like, look, this is going to lead to civil unrest. There's no question about it. So if the government can't, at the very least, do the right thing for morality's sake to prevent these horrendous crimes from occurring, at the very least they should be like, hey, this is going to destabilize our government if we don't get a grip on this.
You're absolutely correct, and it already has, and I'll explain. But before I do, let me just add some points to some of the good points you made. You've had a problem with your Somalis up in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And there's various problems there, not least the corruption problems under Tampon Timmy. And it's not just $1 billion. Now it turns out it's many billions that have been going to Al-Shabaab out in Somalia, all quite in the foreknowledge of those Somali Americans up there in Minnesota. But Somalis over-index when it comes to FGM, female genital mutilation. We have this problem in Britain. We never had a problem of female genital mutilation. We've had a problem of cousin marriage, by the way, about 500 years ago, and then we outlawed it. Now we've imported that problem of cousin marriage, particularly when it comes to the Muslim, or actually a Pakistani Muslim problem. But the Somalis, now in the hundreds of thousands of cases of FGM in our country, and there's a similar problem going on in America, and there's been some campaigns to try and make it illegal because Somalis, Eritreans, East Africans have this problem. It's not all of the Muslim world, by the way. It's
Sure.
just these different cultures have different traditions, and we are importing those traditions into the West. Now, you have a fantastic president who immediately after the DC incident outlawed or put a moratorium, I should say, on all immigration from third world countries because he understands not all cultures are equal. But to your point, the position of importing everyone is actually the position that increases the likelihood of social unrest and social disunity. For every lefty, every progressive, every one of these post-war consensus types who are going to deny a link between ethnicity and culture and these crimes, well, they can play that game. But if they're really going to be proponents of mass migration, they have to tell us how many rapes and murders at the hands of these people is it okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if we know there's only a percentage of people of migrants are going to commit crimes, what percentage? And what percentages is it okay? How many should we tolerate? If they make the argument that, well, all populations have a certain percentage of pedophiles, and they do, and mass murderers, what percentage should we import? And if these, like the Afghans, who have up to 70 times more likely to be suspects of gang raping, how much gang raping should we tolerate in Germany? How much gang raping should we tolerate in Britain and America? I think we need to know the answer to that. But you make a very good point about the social unrest, and this has already happened in Britain. It started famously in a place called Knowsley in 2023, beginning of 2023, I think January, February. And there was a migrant hotel where, so the government, this is a whole other story, the government were shuttling all the illegals into various migrant hotels around the country at considerable expense of the taxpayer, by the way, £8 million a day. And they were putting them in these places, usually in undesirable parts of the country, read working class, poorer parts of the country, because they wanted to not be near them. So they didn't have to deal with the problem of these Afghan men. By the way, they're not women and children, very, very few. It's Afghan men of military age. And so what happened in Knowsley is one of the migrants was filmed making a pass at a young teenage girl. I think she was 15. That video made the rounds online. And it was reported in some media, but not mainstream media. It was reported on GB News, and they played it. Actually, the mainstream media seemed to deny it. They were like, "No, it's misinformation." And we were watching the video on our phones. So, what do you mean it's misinformation? We can see it's happening. The police, I think they arrested someone and then let him go. And so what happened was all of the local men started rioting outside the migrant hotel, tipping the police vans, because they're like, what the hell is going on here? Why are these men going after our daughters? And by the way, it's our responsibility as men to protect the women in our families, the women in our community. So the men were doing the righteous thing. Now, they might have gone too far with it. I agree, they probably went too far with it. But who am I to speak? If I was in that situation, the anger flowing through my veins, maybe I'd have behaved the same way. The media then, having not really reported on the initial crime of the migrant, reported on this whole story as the far right up in Knowsley, which is just outside of Liverpool. They're on the march, they're on the rise because look at all this crime they do. Now, that was beginning of 2023. Fast forward to 2024. It's a month into Sir Keir Starmer's premiership as Prime Minister. And you have the famous Southport killings, very close to Knowsley up in Liverpool. This is a young guy called Axel Rudikabana, murdered 3 children at a Taylor Swift dance party and stabbed many, many others. Murdered the three girls. And the whole country were sort of glued to X because we couldn't trust the mainstream media to report on this properly. So we're like, what the hell is going on? And there was a righteous anger that blew up across the country. There were a lot of protests and vigils that were contained and respectful. But there was also some unsavory, unpleasant escalations where those rioters were angry, surrounded other migrant hotels. They'd had enough because we've experienced this with the Pakistani rape gangs for decades. This is a pent-up anger of this country that's blowing up. So we saw a kind of escalation from Knowsley to Southport, and I do believe our country. I mean, through this summer again, we had another bunch at Epping. I mean, there's so many of these stories that are so
Yeah,
bloody mental,
it's
you
hard to
wouldn't even
keep up
believe
with.
them.
Yeah.
Here's the latest one, actually, just as it comes to mind, is in Epping Hotel. There's an Ethiopian illegal immigrant being kept. Epping is in Essex, just like east of London,
Mm.
and it's Ethiopian was kept in this hotel, and he was arrested because when he was out, he went up to a teenage girl and made some sort of sexual advance at her. So they eventually arrested him for doing that, and then they accidentally let him out of prison. They just let him out. So
Yeah.
then he was roaming around all over the place. After a couple of days, they found him and they eventually deported him. So by the way, they can deport if they actually
Yeah.
want to.
Yeah.
Instead, they're putting them all in the illegals. They should just be deported immediately. They shouldn't set foot in our country. Um, but the point is, as to Tim's point about social unrest and your point about social unrest, the pro mass migration movement is to be pro social unrest. There isn't an
Hmm.
example of
Yeah.
in history when you on scale bring together different groups and expect them to live side by side when they're so drastically different
Hmm.
that it goes well. I actually don't know any situations like that. So
Yeah.
hopefully there can be change, but this stuff has to stop. And yeah, there is a serious threat of increased social disunity. Some people are talking about civil war. I'm not completely convinced that that's possible. I think it's possible, but I'm not completely convinced it's likely or
Sure.
probable yet. But it's something. It's a conversation that's been had at least.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to your point, I mean, look at Europe in the pre-war period. I mean, these were cultures very similar to each other going at it. You look at Africa now, where people point out, oh well, the borders were drawn arbitrarily and they lumped different tribes together. Neighboring
Yeah.
tribes go at it, so it's like, how do you expect people from across the world to cohesively assimilate into Western society? And beyond that, I want to ask you, Winston, let's just grant the post-war consensus argument. These people really are blank slates. These people really are just interchangeable. And let's just say hypothetically that these people coming from Afghanistan or wherever across the third world specifically were these economic miracles. Let's just say they actually overperformed the native British population. Let's just hypothetically grant that. Even then, would sort of the demographic change in these places, is that still not up for debate? I mean, I think it's a very valid concern for the English to want Birmingham to still resemble England, and the Scottish to want Glasgow to resemble Scotland, and the Welsh to, Swansea to resemble Wales. I mean, is that even if we granted everything else, is that, to me, that seems like it's still a valid concern for the British electorate?
It, it's certainly a concern, but we should be specific about what it is we're concerned about. So you've mentioned a couple of things there. The post-war consensus, we should actually drill down on what that exactly that is, to be precise. And then you mentioned blank slatism. I actually don't think blank slatism is what they think. The post-war ideologues, it's not about blank slatism. What they believe, as well as the sort of Karl Popper open society ideology,
Mm-hmm.
what they believe is that all people, this is a progressive fallacy, all people want the same thing, which is to get along, have families, thrive, prosper, live good, long lives. Okay, that's the fallacy. That's not blank slatism. I think that's worth bringing out because people are bringing out this blank slate stuff. And maybe you want to push back against me and tell me why you think I'm wrong, seeing as you brought up blank slatism. But
Sure.
I think the specific issue is this idea that everyone just wants the same thing. That's just demonstrably not true. Not only do different civilizations, different countries, different people want the same things, like between nations,
Mm-hmm.
as is clear, like, the Islamic world does not want the same thing as the Christian world. But even within countries, we don't all want the same things. Look at America. Half the country still hate Trump.
Yeah.
Half the country
Yeah.
think Democrats are ridiculous. So it's just not true that we all want the same things.
Mm-hmm.
It's not true that not everyone wants a family. A lot of us do, but not everyone wants that. Not everyone wants their countries to prosper. Some of them want the destruction of their country, of their own country. So that's just not true. And I think that's the actual fallacy that is force feeding this
Mm-hmm.
dilemma. I agree that there's a post-war dogma that it's kind of a Karl Popperism, this false dichotomy of the good things are democracy, free speech, freedom, liberalism, and the bad things are Nazism, fascism, religion, nationalism. Now, I happen to agree that Nazism and fascism are evil and bad things, and I don't want
Right.
them. I also happen to agree that freedom, liberty, free speech are good things,
Hmm.
but I don't agree that nationalism and religion are bad things. And so
Sure.
that's part of the
Yeah.
Popper dichotomy, but it's an important part because they don't, these people are anti-nationalist. They're nationalism's always, when I was growing up, you'd never say you're a nationalist. It's different now, but you'd never say it because it was a dirty word.
Right.
And
Yeah.
because it's sort of associated with ethno-nationalism
Yeah.
and with the Second World War with the Nazis. But that's not what nationalism. That is a very specific. That's Nazism. Nationalism is wanting the best for your nation,
Yeah.
and not necessarily at the expense of others. In fact, even the
Sure.
Oxford English Dictionary defines it as the expense of others. No, that's jingoism. That's not nationalism.
Right.
So anyway, these words. I know it's semantic, and we're going to get bored in it, but part of this ideology that's built up that means that we've imported rapists en masse to
Hmm.
our country. And then there's some people who genuinely hate the West and they're importing these people to undermine it.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a whole bunch of things happening at once. I'm not sure if that answers your original suggestion question.
No, no, that was great. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, yeah, there's probably a deeper conversation we could probably go into again, sort of on the motivations of the post-war. But no, I mean, I certainly agree. It's a good point that just the priorities are misaligned. If that's not obvious by the way that these people conduct themselves once they arrive on the shores of Britain.
Yeah.
With that, we are running low on time, Winston. If you had any final thoughts and where people can find you to get more.
Uh, Final thoughts are things probably get worse before they get better, but don't give up on Britain. We're very grateful for all of the support that you Americans are giving us. And, you know, where we see you guys calling it out on X and we see you guys calling out on social media, and we're grateful for it because there's a lot of us here in Britain who are fighting for our country.
Hmm.
We're grateful for the support from the Americans. Trump's been great. His administration's been great from our point of view, and calling out this nonsense. And we appreciate it very much when good Americans do that. And I hope that you still consider us your cousins
Of
and
course.
brothers, despite our years of animosity. I still think that we are great united friends, and we have a lot more in common. The Anglosphere has a lot more in common than a lot of the cultures and civilizations we're up against.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, yeah, totally agree. People call me delusional, but I genuinely believe, as a Christian and an optimist broadly, that Britain's best days are ahead, and people like you are doing excellent work to ensure that future manifests. But yeah, Winston, where can people find you?
Inshallah. The Winston Marshall Show. You can catch us on YouTube and we're on Substack. Although very, very exciting stuff here. Reports coming through from my fellow Substackers that we are now being censored on Substack.
Oof.
And this is because of the Online Safety Act that
Right.
was
Yeah.
brought through by Keir Starmer, but also under the Tories, started under Boris Johnson. They're all bastards.
Yeah. So true. Many such cases, unfortunately. But Winston, thank you so much, man. Thank you for hopping on. Hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Nate. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Alrighty, guys. Well, that was the great Winston Marshall. That was a great chat. Yeah, I mean, you can tune into Across the Pond if you want to see us probe deeper on a lot of these issues afflicting Britain and the United States, and how a lot of these are actually sort of two sides of the same coin in many ways. Obviously, Americans here with Trump, we are postured in a better position. Serge, if you can get the raid going for Devori Darkins, if you go to his
Yep,
his
way ahead of you,
page,
bro. I just sent them over there.
let's go. But with that, you can find me on X and Instagram at Real Tate Brown. Come give me a follow. Give me your thoughts on today's show. With the looks like it was a lot more seamless today, so I'm happy with that. But
You're welcome, bro.
yeah, Surge clutched up big time. But we'll be back tonight for Timcast Diary at 8 p.m. We'll see you all there. Thank you very much for watching.